In the village of Enkalikatha, nestled between the misty mountains and the winding rivers, lived a young girl named Zuri. Her home was a modest hut built from sturdy wood and thatch, but it stood out among the others for the vibrant colors that adorned it. Red, yellow, and green paints decorated the walls, representing the love and joy that thrived within. Zuri's family may not have been rich in wealth, but they were rich in heart and spirit, living each day with a sense of purpose and harmony with the land. Zuri was known throughout the village not only for her radiant beauty, but for the spark in her eyes that captivated everyone who met her. Her deep brown skin glowed like the fertile earth, and her wide eyes, the color of dark honey, seemed to hold secrets that others could only dream of understanding. Her hair was a mass of tight, curly locks, often wrapped in bright scarves that matched the colors of her house. She had the grace of a gazelle and the strength of the mighty baobab tree, a perfect balance of power and elegance. The villagers adored her for her kindness and infectious laughter, but there was one thing that made Zuri truly unique, something that few knew about, but that had been whispered among the elders for generations. Zuri was the chosen one. She was born with a gift, a spark that lived within her. This spark was no ordinary blessing. It was a power tied to the ancient forces of nature, a gift that had been passed down through the bloodline of her ancestors. Her ancestors were said to have been great warriors, healers, and spiritual leaders, wielding their gifts to protect the land and its people. But over the years, the knowledge of their powers had faded, and with it, the understanding of what that spark truly meant. Zuri's family never spoke of the spark openly. Her parents, simple farmers who lived off the land, kept her gift a secret, hoping to shield her from the dangers that came with such power. They knew that the world could be both wondrous and cruel, and there were forces beyond their understanding that might seek to use Zuri's gift for darker purposes. So they raised her as a regular village girl, teaching her how to till the soil, cook hearty meals, and care for the livestock, all while ensuring that the secret of her spark stayed hidden. Yet Zuri felt the pull of something greater within her. Every time she stood in the fields at dusk, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she felt the hum of the earth beneath her feet, as though it were calling to her. She could hear whispers in the wind, soft and sweet like the lullabies her grandmother used to sing. The trees seemed to sway in rhythm with her heartbeat, and sometimes, just sometimes, she would catch a glimpse of fleeting images, visions of places she had never been, of people she had never met, and of events that had not yet come to pass. One evening, as Zuri was collecting firewood near the edge of the forest, she felt it again. The pull, a presence in the air, a subtle shift in the wind that carried a strange, almost electric energy. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she turned toward the forest where the trees were thick and dark. In that moment, she knew something was coming, something powerful, something that would change everything. Her heart raced as she hurried back to the village, her footsteps quick and determined. She had to tell her parents. She had to tell them that she could feel it. The time had come for her to understand her gift, for her to learn what it truly meant to have the spark within her. But as she neared her home, she hesitated. She knew that her parents would try to protect her, try to keep her from the truth. They would try to shield her from the danger they had always feared. But Zuri was no longer a child, she was ready. And so, with the weight of her decision heavy on her chest, Zuri walked into her home and closed the door behind her, ready to confront the secret that had shaped her life and would now shape her destiny. The world outside was waiting, and she was ready to meet it head-on. As the night fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, Zuri knew that her journey had just begun. The village of Enkalikatha slept under the blanket of a star-streaked sky, but Zuri could not find peace. Her heart was alive with the weight of her decision, the knowledge that something was calling her, a presence she could not ignore. That night sleep evaded her, and she lay awake in the darkness, staring at the thatched roof above, feeling a restless energy stir within her. The walls of her family's modest hut seemed to close in on her as her thoughts raced. She remembered her mother's soft, yet firm voice whenever the subject of the forbidden room came up. "You must never go in there, Zuri. The room is not for you. It is a place that holds things you will not understand and things that the world must forget." Her father, ever the protector, would simply nod in agreement when her mother spoke, his dark eyes filled with a quiet sadness. Zuri knew this warning well, as it had been repeated countless times over the years. It had always been her mother's greatest fear and her father's silent burden, the room they had forbidden her to enter. This room was hidden behind a wooden door in the farthest corner of their home, an area rarely visited and kept locked away. No one, not even Zuri, had ever set foot inside it. It was a mystery that had hung in the air for as long as she could remember. Every time she asked her parents about the room, they would change the subject or tell her to go outside and play. But now, in the silence of the night, something urged her to go there. The whispers she had felt earlier were no longer a distant hum, they were closer now, teasing at the edge of her mind. They seemed to call her from within the forbidden room itself. Zuri threw off her blanket and stood, her bare feet cold against the earthen floor. She moved toward the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the wooden handle. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had no idea what she would find inside that room, but she could feel the pull, like an invisible thread drawing her closer. She hesitated. What would her parents say if they found out? What would they think of her? Her mother's stern words echoed in her mind, warning her of the dangers within. Yet the spark inside her, the force that had always been with her but had never fully revealed itself, stirred to life, pushing her toward the door. She turned the handle, the door creaked open. The room beyond was dark, its shadowed corners obscured by the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. As Zuri stepped inside, she could feel the air shift, thicker, heavier, as if the room itself were alive. She felt an odd sense of familiarity in the space, as though she had been here before, though her mind told her that was impossible. Her footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floor, the only sound in the otherwise still air. In the center of the room, a small chest stood, covered in dust and cobwebs. It was old, ancient even, with intricate carvings along its sides, symbols Zuri didn't recognize. The markings seemed to pulse in the flickering light as though they were alive. She slowly approached the chest, drawn to it with an overwhelming sense of purpose. When her fingers brushed the surface of the chest, a strange warmth surged through her, like a spark igniting deep within her chest. The spark that had always been a part of her, an intangible force that had never fully revealed itself, began to burn brighter. Her vision blurred and she saw flashes of images, faces, and places she had never known. These weren't dreams, they were memories, ancient memories intertwining with her own. A sudden voice broke through her reverie. It was soft at first, but as she listened it grew clearer, more urgent. Zuri. The voice was familiar yet distant, like the sound of a long-forgotten song carried on the wind. It called to her from the chest, drawing her closer. Her hand trembled as she reached for the clasp, and without thinking she unlocked it. The chest creaked open, revealing a glowing stone nestled inside. It shimmered with a light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The stone was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was translucent, swirling with colors that defied description, shifting from deep blues and purples to bright golds and reds, like the very essence of the universe was contained within it. Zuri's breath caught in her throat. She had no words to describe the feeling that washed over her. It was as though the stone was alive, and as her fingers brushed it, she felt a connection, a bond, a part of her that had always been missing. The voice called to her again, this time with more urgency. Zuri, you must understand, it is time. The words pierced her soul, and in that instant, everything she had ever known, everything she had ever believed began to shift. The stone in her hand seemed to hum with energy, and she could feel the ancient power that had been dormant in her family for generations awakening. The spark that had always lived within her was now fully ignited. She stumbled backward, the stone slipping from her hands and landing softly on the floor. Her heart raced as the room around her seemed to warp and twist, the walls closing in, the air growing thick with a force she could not explain. She could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful, something that had been waiting for her. But then, as quickly as it had come, the power faded. The room returned to normal, the light from the stone dimming to a mere flicker. Zuri stood in the middle of the room, her heart still pounding, her mind reeling with what had just happened. The stone lay before her, quiet now, its colors faded. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What was this power? Why had it chosen her? What did it mean for her and her village? And most importantly, what would her parents say when they found out what she had uncovered? She looked around the room, feeling a sudden sense of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The forbidden room had held the answers, but it had also opened a door to a reality that she wasn't sure she was ready for. As much as she had always known that something was different about her, she had never imagined that the truth would be so overwhelming, so life-altering. With a deep breath, Zuri gathered the courage to stand and leave the room. The forbidden room had shared its secrets, but Zuri knew this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, whatever the stone meant, she would have to face it. There was no turning back now. She picked up the stone, feeling its warmth return in her hands, and made her way toward the door. The whispers had ceased, but the weight of her newfound knowledge hung heavy in the air. As she stepped out of the room and into the hallway, she could hear the faint sound of her parents' voices in the next room, unaware of the journey their daughter was about to undertake. Zuri took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The spark within her had been awakened, and she had no choice but to follow its call wherever it would lead. As the door to the forbidden room closed behind her, Zuri knew one thing for certain: her life was about to change forever. The days that followed Zuri's discovery in the forbidden room were filled with an uneasy stillness. It was as though the very air had shifted in her village, and her once familiar world had grown distant and uncertain. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, something ancient and unknowable, pulling her deeper into a web of secrets that had long been concealed. Zuri's mind was in turmoil. The stone, which now rested beside her bed, had begun to hum faintly with a rhythm that only she could hear. At night, it glowed softly, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Her mother and father were unaware of what had transpired that night. Zuri had not shared the truth with them, unable to find the words to explain what she had discovered. The consequences of revealing such knowledge were too great, too dangerous, and Zuri feared the wrath of her parents, who had always guarded her from the mysteries that lay buried within their family's history. Yet deep down, she knew that there was more to uncover, and that the answers she sought were hidden in places even more forbidden than the room behind her family's hut. The village of Enkalakatha was built on the edge of the great forest, surrounded by towering trees that whispered in the wind. But beyond the trees, beyond the village's borders, stood an iron door, an imposing, unyielding barrier that had always been a subject of intrigue for Zuri and the other children in the village. It was said to lead to an ancient temple long forgotten, and that only the elders knew the true purpose of the door. No one had ever dared to approach it, for the warnings were clear: stay away from the iron door, for it holds the secrets of the gods. For as long as Zuri could remember, the door had remained locked, its rusted surface smooth and silent under the weight of time. But now, with the stone burning softly beside her and the power she had uncovered stirring within her, Zuri could no longer ignore the pull toward it. She knew that if she were to understand the true nature of the force that had awakened within her, she would need to confront the door and the secrets it held. That evening, Zuri quietly slipped out of her family's hut, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. The sun had set, casting a purple hue over the land, and the village was quiet, its people winding down for the night. Zuri's footsteps were light as she made her way toward the outskirts of the village, toward the dense line of trees that separated her world from the unknown. The iron door loomed ahead, half hidden in the shadow of the trees, its massive frame standing like a sentry guarding the secrets of the ages. Zuri's breath caught in her throat as she approached it, the familiar weight of the stone now heavy in her hands. She had always wondered about the door, but now, standing before it, she could feel the undeniable pull to uncover what lay beyond. With trembling hands, she reached for the handle, which was cold and slick with years of neglect. It resisted her touch at first, but as she gripped it more firmly, the door creaked open with an eerie groan, as if it had been waiting for her all along. The air around her seemed to shift, charged with an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Zuri hesitated for only a moment before stepping through the threshold. The darkness beyond the door was absolute. Zuri fumbled for a moment before finding the small lantern she had brought with her, and with a flick of her wrist it came to life, casting a soft golden light across the chamber ahead. The room was vast, its walls covered in strange ancient symbols, carvings that were unfamiliar and unsettling. Some appeared to move in the flickering light, shifting as though alive. It was a sacred space, filled with a sense of reverence that Zuri could feel deep in her bones. As she took a few cautious steps forward, she saw a stone pedestal in the center of the room, atop which lay a large, dark object, an urn. It was old, its surface cracked with age, and the faint markings that ran along its side seemed to glow in the dim light. Zuri's breath hitched. This was it, this was what had been hidden for so long. The stone in her hand pulsed in response, a warm, vibrant energy flowing through her fingertips. Without thinking, she moved toward the pedestal and set the stone down beside the urn. The moment she did, the symbols on the walls shifted, converging on the two objects as if they were reacting to the presence of the stone. The air grew heavy, thick with the power that had been dormant for centuries. Zuri reached for the urn. As her fingers brushed its surface, a sudden, deep hum filled the room. The lantern flickered and went out, plunging the space into darkness. A deep, ancient voice spoke, its words resonating in the very core of her being. Zuri, you have awakened the spark. The time has come to unlock the secrets of your bloodline. Zuri gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was not just in her ears, but in her mind, vibrating through her thoughts like a drumbeat. It was a voice she had never heard, but it was familiar, as though it had always been a part of her. The urn began to tremble in response to the voice, the carvings on its surface glowing brighter with every passing second. Zuri stepped back, fear and excitement battling within her. What had she done? What was happening? The room felt alive, the very walls seeming to pulse with energy. Do not fear, child of the spark, the voice continued, for you are not alone. The power that runs through you is ancient, woven into the very fabric of your being. It is the legacy of those who came before you, and it will guide you to your destiny. Zuri's breath caught in her throat, the legacy of those who came before her, her mind raced. What did that mean? What power was she connected to? You are the chosen one, Zuri, the one who will restore balance, the one who will bring light to the darkness. The words reverberated through her, and she felt a surge of energy, like a bolt of lightning coursing through her veins. Her body was electrified, the stone's power connecting with her own. The urn rattled violently, and then, as if the room could no longer contain the force building within it, the lid of the urn flew off, revealing what lay inside. A scroll, ancient and weathered, unfurled itself in the air before Zuri's astonished eyes. The parchment glowed with an ethereal light, and as it hovered in front of her, the symbols on its surface began to change, rearranging themselves into words she could understand. The spark of life, a bloodline bound by the gods. One shall awaken the force of creation. The time is now. Zuri's mind raced as she tried to process the words, the weight of their meaning crashing down on her. What did the scroll mean, and how did it relate to her? Before she could think further, the voice spoke again, this time softer but more insistent. You must leave this place, Zuri. The world is changing. The darkness that threatens it grows stronger. You are the key to stopping it. Do not let fear rule your heart. Embrace your legacy. Embrace the spark. The words faded, and the room fell silent once again, the power that had filled it slowly dissipating. Zuri stood frozen, her heart racing as she tried to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. The scroll, the urn, the stone, all of it pointed to her. She was part of something much larger than herself, something ancient and powerful. She had awakened a force that had been waiting for generations, and now it was her responsibility to harness it. With a final glance at the now dim urn, Zuri turned and fled the room, the iron door groaning closed behind her. The secrets behind the door had been revealed, but they were only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, Zuri knew one thing for sure: the spark had been lit, and there was no going back. The journey she had begun would lead her to places she could never have imagined, and the world would never be the same again. The days following Zuri's discovery in the Forbidden Room were like a dream teetering on the edge of nightmare. Her life, once simple and serene, had turned into something filled with uncertainty and shadows. The power she had unlocked, the spark of creation, now pulsed through her veins, a constant reminder that her world was no longer the same. But as the weight of her new responsibility settled on her shoulders, so did the whispers of doubt and fear. It started in the village, with glances exchanged behind hands, murmurs that swirled like the smoke of a dying fire. Zuri had always been the center of attention in Inkalakatha, the village that had nurtured her since birth, but now her very presence seemed to provoke attention that hung thick in the air. The elders who had long guarded the secrets of the gods were not blind to what had occurred. They could feel the shift in the air, the disturbance of something ancient awakening in Zuri. And they did not trust it. Zuri could sense their unease, even when they smiled politely and nodded in her direction. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, never left her for too long. The stone she carried, her constant companion, pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate more deeply with them than it did with her. Her mother, though she had not said anything, was also different. Her once warm eyes had turned wary, her gentle hands now trembling when they touched Zuri's face. She had always been Zuri's protector, but there was a distance between them now, a gulf of unspoken fears that Zuri could not cross. It was on the 6th day after her discovery that the fire of accusation was lit. Zuri was walking through the village square, the sun beating down on the thatched roofs of the huts when she felt it. The pull, the familiar hum of the stone that never left her side. Her heart began to race, her breath quickening. She stopped in her tracks, looking around, but the source of her unease was not visible. Her gaze settled on the group of village elders gathered at the far end of the square, their faces stern, their voices hushed in conversation. Something was amiss. As if in response to her growing anxiety, one of the elders, an older man with a weathered face and eyes as sharp as broken glass, stepped forward, his gaze locking onto hers. There was no mistaking the suspicion in his eyes. "Zuri," he called, his voice like gravel, dry and unsettling. "Come here." Zuri hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the stone in her hand grew heavier, almost unbearable. She had always respected the elders, revered them for their wisdom, but today there was no comfort in their presence. She moved toward them, her legs unsteady beneath her, as though her very body knew something was wrong before her mind could catch up. When she reached them, the elder who had called her stood tall, his hands resting firmly on a staff that was adorned with intricate carvings of the village's history. He did not greet her with the usual kindness. Instead, his eyes were sharp, accusatory. "We know what you've done," he said, his voice low and steady. "We know what you've awakened." Zuri's breath caught in her throat. Her pulse quickened, her mind spinning as the weight of his words pressed down on her. She had hoped, no, prayed, that the village would remain ignorant of what had transpired. But the elders were not easily deceived. They had sensed the disturbance, the stirring of ancient forces that had been dormant for so long. I don't know what you mean," Zuri said, trying to mask the panic rising in her chest. Her voice faltered despite her best efforts to remain calm. The elder's gaze hardened. "The spark," he said, his voice now tinged with fear and anger. "You have awakened the spark, the power of the gods. It is not something to be taken lightly." Zuri's stomach churned. "I didn't mean to." "You have disrupted the balance," the elder snapped, cutting her off. "The spark is not meant for someone like you. You are not prepared for what it demands." The other elders nodded in agreement, their faces clouded with concern. They were afraid not just for Zuri, but for the village, for the world that they had worked so hard to protect. They had always known that one day the spark would awaken again, but they had never anticipated that it would be someone like Zuri who would be chosen. The bloodline of the gods was not meant to fall into the hands of the untested, the young, the uninitiated. Zuri stood frozen, the weight of their words crushing her. She wanted to scream, to explain that she hadn't asked for this power, that she was just a girl trying to make sense of the strange and overwhelming forces that were now part of her. But no one was listening. No one would believe her. They had already decided. "You have caused an imbalance," another elder, a woman with long, silver hair and eyes like fire, spoke with a voice that brooked no argument. "And now you must face the consequences." "Consequences," Zuri repeated, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" The elder's lips curled into a grim smile. "You will be tested. If you are truly worthy of the power you carry, you will prove it. If not," she let the words trail off, leaving the meaning hanging in the air. Zuri's mind raced. She had been prepared for many things: fear, confusion, even anger from her family and friends. But this accusation was something she had not anticipated. The village had always been a place of safety, a sanctuary from the world's dangers. But now she felt the walls closing in, the familiar faces turning into strangers, their trust in her eroding like sand in the wind. "You will come with us," the elder said, stepping forward with an air of finality. "We must perform the ritual of judgment. Only then will we know if you can be trusted with the power you have unleashed." Zuri's heart sank. She had heard of the ritual of judgment, but never before had she thought it would be applied to her. The ritual was a test of purity, a trial by fire designed to determine whether one could be entrusted with the power of the gods. It was said to be a harrowing experience, one that no one had undergone in generations. To fail the ritual was to be cast out, to lose the right to wield the spark forever. With no other choice, Zuri nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll go." The elders turned and began to walk, leading her toward the village's sacred grounds. The path was silent, save for the soft rustling of the trees and the occasional call of a bird in the distance. Zuri's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of the stone, of the voice that had spoken to her, of the fire that was now burning inside her. As they reached the clearing, Zuri saw that the entire village had gathered. The people stood in a circle, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Her family was there, her mother's eyes wide with worry, her father's face grim. She could feel the weight of their disappointment, their sorrow. The ritual of judgment began with silence. The elders stood in a circle around Zuri, their faces stoic, their eyes filled with ancient knowledge. The air grew heavy, charged with the power that was about to be unleashed. Zuri could feel the stone in her hand growing warmer, its pulse quickening in time with her own heartbeat. The elder with the silver hair stepped forward, holding a small, carved dagger in her hands. "Zuri of Enkalikatha," she intoned, her voice resonating with authority. "You stand before us as one who has awakened the spark of the gods, but with such power comes great responsibility. Will you prove yourself worthy, or will you be cast aside?" Zuri swallowed, her throat dry. "I will prove myself." The elder nodded, and with a swift motion she sliced her palm with the dagger. Blood dripped onto the ground, the symbol of the god's power. The ritual had begun. Zuri's heart pounded as she raised her hand, placing it over the blood-stained earth. The stone in her hand burned hotter, and she felt a surge of energy flow through her, like fire coursing through her veins. Suddenly, the world around her seemed to spin. The air grew thick, and a low hum filled the space, resonating with the power that had been unlocked. Zuri closed her eyes, focusing on the energy inside her, letting it flow freely, but something was wrong. Something was pulling at her, trying to take control. A voice deep and ancient echoed in her mind. "You are not ready, Zuri." The stone in her hand pulsed violently, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. The ritual had awakened something deep inside her, something far more powerful than she had anticipated. "Zuri," her mother's voice rang out, filled with panic. "No, you're not ready." But it was too late. The fire of accusation had been lit, and now there was no turning back. The silence that followed Zuri's outburst was deafening, a thick, suffocating fog that seemed to hang in the air. The ground beneath her feet quivered, as if reacting to the power she had unleashed. Her hands, still gripping the stone, were trembling. The pulse of energy within her surged once more, this time uncontrolled, thrumming through her veins like an uncontrollable wildfire. She could feel it. She could feel everything, every ripple in the air, every heartbeat, every breath of the people around her. But amid it all, there was a deeper, darker force pulling at her, something she could neither see nor comprehend. The elders, their faces pale with a mixture of awe and fear, stepped back, creating a widening gap between Zuri and the rest of the village. They had never witnessed anything like this before. The ritual of judgment was not supposed to go this way. The stone, the spark, the fire, it was all too much. The ancient energies that had lain dormant for so long were awakening faster than any of them had anticipated. The silver-haired elder, whose eyes glowed faintly with the power of the gods, was the first to break the silence. Her voice was steady, though it trembled with an undercurrent of disbelief. "Zuri, daughter of Enkalikatha, do you understand what you have done?" Zuri's breath hitched as she stared at the ground, the pulse of the stone growing frantic in her palm. She felt as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around her, as though she was on the verge of being consumed by a power far beyond her control. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, her voice shaking with the weight of her confession. The elders exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions hardening. They could feel the threat in the air, the deep disturbance caused by Zuri's awakening. The girl before them was no longer just a village child. She had become a conduit for a power that had been dormant for centuries. And with that power came something far more dangerous than any of them had foreseen. "You have awakened the spark," the elder said, her voice calm but firm. "But there is more to the story than you understand. The spark you carry is not a gift, Zuri. It is a curse. It was never meant for you." Zuri's head shot up, confusion and fear flooding her chest. "A curse?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't understand. I thought it was a gift. I thought it was meant for me." The silver-haired elder shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a sadness that Zuri had never seen before. "The spark is not just power, child. It is the key to an ancient prophecy, a prophecy that speaks of a time when the world would be cast into chaos, when the balance would be broken and the gods would no longer walk among us." Zuri took a step back, her mind reeling. "What are you saying? What prophecy?" The elder's gaze turned to the sky, as if seeing something in the clouds that Zuri could not. "It speaks of a child born with the blood of the gods in her veins. A child who would awaken the spark and, in doing so, set the stage for the destruction of everything we know. That child would have the power to either save the world or bring it to ruin." Zuri's heart skipped a beat. "But why me?" she breathed. "Why was I chosen?" The elder did not answer immediately. Instead, her eyes softened and she took a slow, deliberate step towards Yuri. It is not for us to say, Yuri, the gods have their reasons and we are but their servants. But you must understand the spark is not to be wielded lightly. It cannot be controlled by the uninitiated. The energy you feel now is only the beginning. There is more inside you, much more. Yuri's mind swirled with fear, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. How could this be happening? How could she, just a simple girl from Enkalikatha, be the one to bear such a heavy burden? She had never asked for this, never sought power. All she wanted was to understand the secrets of the stone, the voice that had called to her, and the path it had set her upon. But the answers seemed to only lead to more questions. And now, with the village standing in silent judgment, Yuri knew that there was no escaping the truth, no hiding from the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. As the elders continued to speak, their words blending together, Yuri's mind wandered back to the forbidden room, to the day she had found the stone. That was where everything had begun, the strange whispering, the energy that had surged within her, the sudden understanding that had come in a flash. But now, standing before the elders, it felt as though she had been deceived, tricked into awakening something that was never meant to be touched. The silver-haired elder's voice broke through her thoughts. Yuri, you must choose, she said, her eyes locking onto Yuri's. You must choose whether you will embrace the spark and the prophecy that comes with it, or whether you will reject it and try to live a life free of this burden. But know this, the path you choose will have consequences. There is no turning back from this. Yuri's pulse raced as she turned to look at her family. Her mother's eyes were filled with sorrow, her face pale and drawn. She had always been her protector, her safe haven, but now even her mother seemed distant, lost in the weight of the prophecy that hung over them all. Yuri's heart wrenched. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The elder stepped closer, her voice softening. It is not about what you can or cannot do, Yuri. It is about what you choose to become. The gods have given you this power, but it is you who must decide how to wield it. Will you be the one to heal the world, or will you be the one who ushers in its destruction? Yuri swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. She glanced down at the stone in her hand, its glow fading slightly as if sensing her doubt. The spark was still there, waiting. But now it felt heavier, laden with the weight of 1,000 lives. I don't know, she whispered. How can I possibly make such a choice? The elder's expression softened. You may not have all the answers now, but in time, Yuri, you will. The truth is often hidden in darkness, and it is only through struggle that we come to understand it. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the village as the day gave way to night. The villagers watched in tense silence, waiting for Yuri's decision, as if the fate of the world hung in the balance. Yuri looked out at the gathering of people, her family, the elders, her friends, and felt the weight of their gazes upon her. In their eyes, she saw fear, hope, and a deep longing for answers. But there were no easy answers to be had. Only the truth, the harsh, painful truth that had been hidden from her until now. I choose, she said, her voice steady but quiet. I choose to find my own path. I will not be defined by the prophecy or the spark. I will make my own fate, and I will protect those I love. For a moment, there was only silence. The villagers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then, slowly, the elder nodded, as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The path is yours to walk, Yuri, she said softly. But know that it will not be easy. You are the keeper of the spark now, and you must decide what it will mean for you, for the village, and for the world. As Yuri looked around at the faces of her people, she felt a sense of resolve begin to settle within her. The truth had been revealed, but it was up to her to shape the future. Whatever came next, she would face it with courage, knowing that she was the one who would write her own story. And so, with the weight of the spark still burning within her, Yuri took her first step into the unknown, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The truth had been revealed. Now it was time to create a future of her own choosing.